to get out of your comfort zone if you want to live an exhilarating, adventurous life. You have to stay focused.
It ain't over till it's over.
We are men. That's what we do. Oh, we on? Welcome. You sure? Got sound? Sounds dead to me. We had a little sound difficulty before we started here. We should have had somebody check, see if they can hear us. Sure we're on? Welcome to another edition of Mark's Inspiration. The Power is Within podcast. We are late getting started tonight, and I have a special guest, Coach Oriana. She is a personal performance and executive coach, and we're going to talk about the value of relationships in life in general, in everything. And I'm sure she'll have some valuable information for you tonight. Let's bring her on.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. It's pretty loud, Frank. Hang on. We got a lot of volume. We had a little volume or sound problem here.
How's that?
That's good. Sounds good. Yeah. Tell us about yourself. How'd you get into coaching and what it is that you do? Relationships. Tell us what you do.
Certainly. Yeah. First off, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be in active conversation and in support of men's healing and men's growth and progress. That's really part of my journey in life is to be in support of men's health and healing. And I feel like by doing that, that is how I am in support to women and children, is via that means. As you mentioned, my name is Coach Oriana, and I'm a personal performance coach and a certified relationship with men to support their journey to excellence and to healing their relationships, starting with their relationship with themselves. So I primarily focus on self-mastery and then relationship mastery and then life mastery.
I think it's difficult for you to have a relationship with anybody, whether it be an intimate or a personal or business relationship, if you don't know yourself or you don't have a relationship with yourself, or if you're not comfortable in your own skin, which was a term someone said to me years ago, and I'm like, what does that mean? Comfortable in your own skin. But now I understand it. So you say you help mostly men. Why did you start, what made you decide, well, I'm going to coach men or help men rather than women? I know you say you help women and children indirectly, which I agree 100% because men need to be leaders. So who wants to follow someone if they're not able to lead? But what inspired you as a woman to decide you wanted to help men in that respect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my past career, I worked on a college campus, and my work on that campus included oversight over gender equity, believe it or not, gender equity and inclusion, primarily Title IX, and gender equity in sports and in educational programs. And as the age of Title IX has really changed over time to be more than just sports, and is now really more about sexual harassment and sexual misconduct on campus than anything else, to be honest with you. And so I spent about 4 years doing that work, and that work really led me to a place where I realized that actually men were the ones who were disenfranchised in that conversation. Young men, or we're talking college age students, which is primarily about 17 to 23 years old. And men were my experience in that role and overseeing internal investigations of misconduct, where 98% of the people who were receiving some type of disciplinary action or had a complaint filed against them were men. And just to see the air around those conversations, where it was, kind of blaming, um, very shaming, and kind of like this automatic idea that the men were in the wrong. Um, and so that kind of started to wake me up, and started to think to myself, who's having conversations with these young men about relationships and communication skills, but also about red flags and how they protect themselves in relationships with young girls who are also learning and growing and going through experiences as amateurs, if you will, in their relationships. And I realized that there wasn't anything substantial that was actually happening in that realm. I kept looking out and thinking, where are the men who should be having this conversation with these young men on campus?
Good
And
question.
I couldn't see them. I couldn't find them. But I also felt like I wasn't qualified to have this conversation because of my gender.
Yeah.
And it actually took me a few years to overcome that and to realize that not only did I need to be the one to lead the conversation, I had a duty and responsibility to, because I was the one that was noticing the problem. And if God wasn't leading anybody else to step into the role, then that meant the role was mine, because I was the one witnessing it and in the position to see the issue. So once I started to step in and realize that my voice was actually not only well received but welcome in that space, my heart started to expand and really to consider, how else can I do this? In what ways? When you work on a college campus, and particularly under like a federal government legal umbrella, you're very limited in what you can do to so-called help people. So I really started to realize, if I want to help people and I want to have impact, I needed to leave that environment, because that environment dictates how you can help.
Pretty
Um,
restrictive.
and it's very restrictive, very narrow definitions of helping people. So I left, and I thought, I need to find a way to do this my way. And even after I left, I still didn't figure it out right away. It's really been just in the last year that I felt truly, almost like a spiritual discord within myself at my hesitance to step fully into the position of working exclusively with men.
Yeah.
I kept thinking to myself, well, what will happen if I do that? And if I cut off what I do with women, or my availability to work with women, I was hesitant to do that until it just became very, very clear over time. Every time I show up in the men's health and healing conversation, for the most part, it's well received, it's welcomed. I find that men actually do appreciate having the voice of a feminine woman in this space. It's really not the men that I get hate from. It's actually from feminist women,
Right.
who, their perception of what I'm doing or saying is that it's against them, and which really couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah. Well, you spoke about you had an inner guide or inner feeling or spiritual feeling that you needed to do this. And we all have that desire to do something within us. And what happened, just like you wrestle with the logicalization, I call it, and the rationalization of why I can't do it or should I do it. But when you
Right.
know you should, and fortunately, I believe for you and for the people you are helping and are going to help, you went ahead and did that. Because anytime we all have that calling to do something within us, and
Mhm.
we try to push it down because we're afraid. And it's really where we need to go. And if we don't walk through that fear, I believe we live, as was it Thoreau said, lives of quiet desperation. Because we're doing something to make a living, but we're not really doing what we've came here to do. And
Absolutely.
says you can't until you express yourself fully in what you're supposed to do. And some people say, well, I don't know what that is. I think if you just take a guess and head off in a direction and be open minded, you'll be guided to where you need to go. But you just have to walk out there. Now, you were talking about guys. This is my son Henry. I forgot to introduce him. He's what are you, 19 or 20?
19.
I got 5 boys and a couple daughters, so I forget how old they are. But,
Beautiful, big family. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
so you were talking
Thank
about
you.
the problems in the college. How many of those, let's say, accusations were false accusations against the men? Did you? What percentage would you say? Or
Yeah.
maybe the perception was not quite of what really happened, or
Yeah, I would say probably the false accusation is very difficult to determine, but the misinterpretation of what occurred was almost 100% of the time, right? Like the stories of what occurred almost never matched up.
yeah,
Or if what like the perspective of what occurred, even when the stories were similar. You know, first we did A, B, C, and D. Even when the series of events is the same, the perspective and the point of view of the circumstances around what occurred were totally different. And in some cases, you know, these young men were finding themselves in situations where, um, you know, they were being put in this very difficult position after something occurred, and it was that position that they were being put in was because the young woman didn't like the fact that she was discarded,
yeah,
right? um, that it was just an intimate act and nothing else, right? Nothing else was available for her to have access to. And so that now became something that she felt embarrassed about and something that she wanted to create a bigger issue around. And
yeah.
so a lot of people would come to my office just like, I don't want this person to talk to me ever again, or to be in my classes, or to be in my major, or to live in the same residence hall, you know?
Because they were rejected, or in some cases, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a difficult. I mean, when I was younger, in my case, like the good girls always said no. I mean, there was a game we played. Like maybe I would try to take off their top and they'd stop me, and I'd wait a little while, I'd try again. And that was just kind of the way and they would say no, but it was just, and these girls were the ones that I would end up having relationships with because they weren't easy. They had some self respect. But honestly, nowadays, in the same scenario, if she would happen to take you to court because she got mad or had the opportunity and you were honest, I mean, she said no 5 or 6 times. Well, but you may be with a girl like that for 2 or 3 years. And that's so I don't know even what to tell young men anymore because I heard some girls say she was quite radical on TikTok or something. Unless it's an enthusiastic yes, it's a no. I mean, and I have had girls say no, and I knew they meant no. Okay, but when does no mean no? How is a young man supposed to know that? Do you have to get a written consent, or should they carry the? What would you recommend to like my son and other young men?
You know, actually, that enthusiastic yes, that's actually good advice for men, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you why I think that's good advice, because um, where the water gets really murky is when things are ambiguous, where there's ambiguity. You know, that's where it's murky. You know, in the past, I agree with you. I'm 40, so I understand what you're talking about. Like that gentle persistence in the past was not uncommon and was not something that typically women would file a report over. But
Yeah,
nowadays on college campuses, it is. It is, unfortunately. And so, you know, that the advice that if it's not an enthusiastic yes, it's a no, that actually would protect a young man
Mm.
more than not, right? In that that's a more clear yes than like, oh, I don't know, maybe, kind of, sort of, we'll see, like all of that wishy-washiness, if you take that as a yes, can really get a young man into, a pretty deep water really fast that he did not expect.
I had that situation last night,
Oh, did you?
Yeah, when me and Mark went out to the, it was like kind of like a club or like a bar type deal. There was this girl that was all on me and she kept kissing me and everything like that, but I didn't want to continue to entertain her because of the fact that she was so drunk that maybe she wakes up the next morning and regrets it,
Right.
So I just kept telling her no, but she kept coming on to me. So it's just kind of, it's difficult sometimes too, because I know there's a lot of guys that don't get a lot of female attention and they would eat that up, they
Yeah.
would take advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
And then the girl wakes up the next morning and kind of regrets it.
Well, here's the deal with the enthusiastic yes,
Mhm.
where they almost feel like they need permission. There's actually some men are actually opting out of dating because of situations like this, because they're in a position, maybe in their career or maybe they're in the service, and if they get some kind of a bad, once the bell's rung, it's rung, get some kind of a, not charge, but maybe an accusation against them, it ruins their career, whether it's true or not. So, but then again, on the other hand, for a man or a young man, if he goes up to a woman, he's tentative and he's almost like asking, "Oh, can I kiss you?" or it takes away that, it really can kill attraction. So it's really difficult for men because if he's wanting or even almost asking permission, girls aren't really attracted to men who ask for permission. I mean, I've been with enough women in my life, I can tell the signals and all that, but a lot inexperienced men, they don't know how to have conversations with girls to find out if she wants to be with them. You never say exactly what you want to do, but you can make statements and you can pick up on whether they're interested in you sexually. Because I mean, like in some places, like in the Philippines, and some other place, maybe here that you know of, if you actually stare at someone, it could be considered sexual harassment or I don't know if it's assault, but it can be considered harassment just to, and and most coaches for men for women will say you need to look at a woman until she looks away. Now, of course, you don't look at her like some killer
Yeah.
stalker, but and I've done that. But there's a way that you can your body language and everything that you can look at a woman like that and she doesn't find it creepy. But then
Mhm.
somebody who's learning, he may come off as creepy until he learns how to do it. I mean, so it's getting where
Yeah.
how guys, you're not supposed to catcall anymore like construction workers. I mean, even that's considered crude and harassment. And it's just men being men. I think men being men. You go to other countries and it wasn't years ago, it wasn't like that here. I mean, so it's like it's only harassment if the guy is ugly and she doesn't like him. But the same handsome guy she's interested in does it, then that's okay. So it's almost like she gets to determine by what mood she's in or what she likes whether it's okay or not. So I don't know how to even advise young
Yeah.
men on that. What would
I
you?
mean, I have a nephew who's 23 and he's in college, and he's dating and he's mostly had girlfriends. But if I would advise any young man like I advise my nephew, which is don't rely on those unspoken sex signals. You know, just don't rely on them. Could a man learn to rely on them and to understand them and to give and receive clear sex signals after college or like outside of the college campus setting? Like, yeah, I think that those are communication skills that can be learned relatively easily. But on a college campus setting where the stakes are so high and these processes, like once a report is filed, it can't be ignored. The campus has to take action on it. There could be adverse action or disciplinary action on the student, up to and including expulsion in some matters, depending on the circumstances. But there's a lot of adverse actions that a college campus can take on a student, male or female, that come way before a suspension or expulsion, and it's just the added inconvenience, or like serious. Let's say a serious adverse action, for example, would be like getting kicked off of a team. or not being allowed to travel with your team, getting removed from your housing and having to go live somewhere else that you don't want to live. Like all of that stuff is going to suck. And if it happened because, you relied on sex signals from this young woman who, again, she's learning and growing too, and she's not an adult by any stretch who's an expert in giving and receiving sex signals with a man either, right? So I would think that because of that, that's part of why there's so much miscommunication, right? We just have a lot of really young people who are not experts in communicating. They do feel awkward around asking for exactly what they want. Um, and so there's a lot of left up to interpretation. And in that ambiguity, there's just a lot of trouble, right, that could be gotten into.
Well, now, would you agree that there's a certain train of thought, and I tend to agree with this also, that women have a tendency to communicate covertly and men are more overt. So that therein lies the problem too. A man's a lot, well, nowadays men are a little bit softer than they were when I grew up, but a masculine man is more or less going to come out and either indicate what he wants or say what he wants. But a woman, a lot of times does, and then a lot of times she doesn't want to say an enthusiastic yes because she doesn't want, if she likes him, she doesn't want him to think that she's a tramp.
Yeah, right.
And she wants to, so there you get into that aspect too. She may not want to come out, even if he asks her straight out, she may not want to come out. Well, if I say yes, he's going to think it's the first date. I really want to be with him, but if I say yes, he's going to think, I'm with somebody. And then what's she going to say? The old line, yeah, I've never done this on the first date. Maybe that's true sometimes. I've heard it before, and sometimes it's not. But when a girl tells me that, I'm kind of doubtful that she says that to me. I've never done this on the first date, so.
Yeah, I mean, part of what we used to do was educate students on how to ask for what they want and how to be direct about it. The issue is that when it comes to sex and intimacy, when young people who ask directly for what they want tend to get teased or shamed in some way, right? When a young man is like, hey, I think you're really pretty. I would really like to have sex with that. That's direct. Like you can't get any more direct than that. And at the same time, like there's this idea, which I really think comes from feminism in some way, that's like completely rejects the man who's forthcoming about his intentions and what he wants and goes like, oh my gosh, you pig, how dare you say that to me, right? But the guy who hides his intention and is what I call the snake in the grass, right? Like that guy, he'll go ahead and get it because he was covert about it. But he puts himself in at really high risk in the college campus setting. I mean, worst case scenario outside of the campus setting, he's just an asshole, right? Who had sex with her and then never called again, but on campus, like I said, the stakes are way too high, and like I said, I mean, men are getting disciplined over this stuff.
Yeah. It's a different atmosphere on the campus, I imagine, than it is out here in we'll say the real world and the other world. Different than that. But
yeah.
If I was going to say, I had a point here. If a man goes up and straight out asks a girl, I mean, I've been pretty, if I tell a girl's open for it, I've been pretty straight out forward about asking a girl and telling her I want to. I'll say something. I used to say something like, man, I'd love to get naked in bed with you. I don't want to do anything, but I just want to. And then, of course, once we got there, things would. So that may be being a little bit dishonest, I'm not sure, but obviously they know if I want to get in bed with them. But you can't say things like that, or you can't just go up to a girl and ask her if she wants to have sex because, like you said, the response. But when a guy comes up to a girl and says, hey, let's get together and hang out sometime. What does he want? If he's a man, he wants to have, his end goal is to have sex with her. I mean, if he likes her or whatever. And they're also worried about guys if she's going to like him. I tell men, don't worry about if she's going to like you. Find out if you're going to like her. What is about her? Don't go up there. And then that takes a lot of the nervousness out of them instead of them going up there seeking the approval of the girl. So they're not going to be honest if they think it's going to offend her.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Which it just adds fuel to the fire, and then when alcohol gets involved, I mean, it's explosive.
And the business drop, and then they wake up feeling, And the guys, the woman feels maybe guilty or can't believe she did, and then the guy wakes up and thinks, "Ah, I really didn't like her," and then that's a recipe for problems because maybe he
Right.
ignored her, and then she feels like, yeah,
That's one of the things I had an issue with last night. I was hanging out with this girl and she got really drunk, and I didn't want to mess around with her. She kept trying to kiss me, and I didn't want to mess around with her because she was so drunk that I didn't feel right about it. It just wasn't a good situation. And on top of that, too, I didn't. If we messed around, didn't want her to wake up the next morning feeling some sort of guilt or something like that,
Yeah.
and then her maybe uh, take some sort of lawful action on it or something.
yeah.
So I up and I kept my distance and I kept telling her that I didn't want to do anything with her. But I mean, they're persistent too. When they have a little bit of alcohol in them, they're very persistent. But I don't want to put myself in a situation where I could get in trouble. And it can get difficult too because there's those guys that don't get much attention from females, and the moment they get a little bit of attention, they eat it up, and then they get themselves in a situation where they could get in trouble.
Yeah, and
Right.
if the girl was drunk and she was with someone who she normally wouldn't be with, not drunk, and she wakes up the next day and
Hmm.
she may feel like she's taken advantage of. Because in her right mind, sober, she think, I would never do anything with her. How did that happen? So, but when you think about, to me, it's almost like these young women have have a power that they really don't know how to wield. They're not. Now, I agree. Years ago it was too much the other way. That a man could pretty well get away with anything. Now it's swung so far back that a woman could wake up feeling guilty about something she knowingly did, and then yet destroy the man's life. So it's almost like a power they have. And like you said something earlier about too, about how when the woman speaks, she can go for no apparent reason. And I've experienced some of this on another level. They can go say something about you to the authorities, but no proof, and they will come and arrest you without anything. So that's a lot of power from someone maybe that is lacking in character. So what do you think
Yeah,
about?
I don't know. I mean, I think again, like the combination of young people in that particular it's very sensitive. There's all kinds of issues, like sexual harassment and things like that. I mean, that's just a small part of all of the drama that happens on any given college campus any single day. But I think it's the combination of a lot of people from very diverse backgrounds with very different upbringings, all different types of value systems, coming into one community. A lot of times a small community. The college campus I worked on was relatively small. And, all of a sudden, there's just by virtue of like, oh, you live in my dorm, or we're in the same class, or we're in the same major, now we're best friends. And so there's very little vigilance, and like that self-protective eye that or mindset that a lot of people would have outside of a college campus setting. Inside of that setting, they're just like completely guard down, you know, and they don't realize that that's not a good idea. That's not smart. It's not smart in any environment, but especially the college campus environment, because
Well, I suppose it's kind of
the go
I
ahead.
suppose it's kind of like once they're there for a while, it's kind of like they feel like they're at home to a certain degree. But it's really not home because, like you said, there's so much diversity and different people from all different walks of life there. Okay, so
Yeah.
let- let's switch gears here on something a little more positive.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, after I did that work, that was when I got relatively burned out doing that. And I decided I loved, coaching and consulting and things like that. And I wanted to do that just on my own. But I wanted to do it my way. Um, and so I left the college campus setting and I started working with a coach of my own. Worked with several coaches of my own to build my own, practice as a coach and to get certified as a relationship coach. And I love it. So that's what I've dedicated my life to now. So I have worked with women, and I think There are a lot of services available for women. Are a lot of coaches, including a lot of male coaches that specialize in relationship coaching for women. I personally find a lot of value in the male coaches that are serving women, in that they can provide a man's perspective on relationships to women, which I think is very important and necessary in the marketplace. And so I started to really realize, I could make a difference as a woman in service to men in men's coaching and healing, because otherwise it's just an echo chamber of men talking to men about women, right? Who better to help men understand women, or the woman in their life, than another woman? So my goal in my coaching isn't to educate men on how to be men. I don't know how to be a man. I'm not one, right? I don't educate men on how to be masculine. I don't know how to do that. But I educate men on how to pursue excellence, and how to get out of their own way in doing that, in terms of their mindset and their emotional well-being, as well as their spiritual well-being. And then I have a number of different modalities that I use to support men to, you know, uh, become the leaders in their own life, so that they can then become leaders to the women in their lives. That's important. I'm not sure that other people are doing that. I don't consider myself a dating coach. I don't necessarily talk to men about how to date, but some of my clients are single and dating. Some of my clients are married. And the clients that I have that are in either camp, they come to me and they say, this is the situation I have with my partner. What should I say to her, or what should I do, or things like that. And I do have those types of conversations as well, like real time, this is what's happening, what should I say, to help my client get the best outcome in that scenario.
Well, you talk about leading now, and you teach men how to lead. A lot of women would say, "I don't want a leader." They
Unfortunately.
don't, yeah, they don't want to follow anybody. They look at this leader as someone like being a boss, which is really ironic, because they'll go out and work for a man, more than likely a boss, somewhere up in the higher echelons, and they'll bend over backwards to get a few more dollars, and then come home, but then they don't want to cooperate. I'll say, I won't use that submit word, that really rubs people wrong. Cooperate
Yeah.
with their husband. And I'll tell you what I get a lot of flack about. We call them massages. Actually, I had somebody send me a little hate message the other day about, no, you don't want a partner, you want a slave. Because my stance is, I like a traditional relationship where the woman stays home, okay, raises the kids, makes a nice home. She's not trapped here. Nobody's forcing her to do anything. And people call it a slave. Now, I say, and I'll get your input on this, if she's a slave, then how much more am I a slave by going out and working all day and risking different things? And then so I can provide a nice, safe home and a car to drive. And because I've been married more than once, and my women that have been with me have everything. They got provision, they got protection. And then after we split up, they realized they wanted to come back, but too many things happened. And actually, the last one told me, "You're just too good to us." So I make it good for my women if they can accept that. I've also had them tell me, I need to go back to the 13th century. And the other guy says, "Oh, it's a new day." Now, it may be a new day. For me, this is my belief. Now, if a woman has to put her kid in childcare, I understand that if she's by herself. But many times, the only reason the child is in childcare, being raised by a minimum wage daycare worker, that who knows what their values are, what they're putting into the child, in the impression age, between the age of 0 and 7, they're spending most of their time with someone like that. Plus, and when they go to school, it's latchkey. And then with both the husband and wife's working, well, yes, they have to work if they want the $500,000, $1 million house and 2 Escalades in the drive. What are we showing our children? What kind of a relationship are we forming with them? We're showing them that materialistic is much more important than because nobody's going to raise that child as well as the mother. That's what I believe. So, it's one of the other. You want the boat, the lake, the storage place full of stuff you don't use, and then the kids in daycare. So, what is your idea about that? about why has that type of relationship been belittled? There's no more honorable uh, profession, if you like, than a woman staying home raising the future of our nation. And that has really been belittled. That's a 24-hour day, 7 day a week job, and it does not get the admiration it deserves. Femininity has been bashed, motherhood has been bashed, and being a wife. It's like, I mean, their mother, when I was married to her, people would ask, well, don't you work? She just, well, I have 3 kids, but you don't work? It's like, and I've raised these kids by myself for the last 10 years and run my business too. And there's no days off. You get sick, you don't get off. I mean, there's nobody here. I mean, I don't have anybody to help me. So, but it just does not get. Why do you think that doesn't get the respect and the honor that it deserves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that what we have to remember and what we have to teach the next generation is that the destruction of the nuclear family has been done on purpose, with intention, with a plan and agenda, that it would actually get the US corporation greater tax revenue, right? The destruction of the nuclear family is financially beneficial to the government entity. This had, when we talk about first and second wave feminism, we're talking about the idea that women should be treated with equality in the social structure, and by the government entity, right? They should be able to have rights. They should be able to be, socially and politically protected and represented, and they should be able to vote. Okay, fine. The next wave of that introduced the idea that women were oppressed by the men in their lives. It was actually a movement that was started originally by, government entities, shadow government entities, in order to destruct the nuclear family with the idea that, hey, there's 50% of the population that isn't working and that we're not collecting taxes. How do we get them into the workforce so that they can pay into the tax system, right? Okay, well, what do we have to do first? We have to give them we have to create an entity that will take care of their children while they work, right? Then came the public school system entity. Well, what are the kids going to learn in public school? Whatever the hell the government entity that created that school wants them to learn,
Right.
right? They're no longer going to be taught family values, or that the nuclear family system is at the top of the pyramid above the government system, right? Because that's where the nuclear family used to sit in the past, was at the top of the hierarchy. You know, the nuclear family then needed to become a profit center to the government. And that's why, feminism was really developed, was more than anything else, was to put women in the workforce. And then in order to create an entire system of taxation, on properties, real property, then they built schools, right? Which obviously people pay property taxes in order to support the school system and in order to support all kinds of different government programs that make a school system possible. So if we teach that, to young people like your son, for example, then they can start to recognize that, the mindset behind the feminist movement. Now we have second or third and fourth wave feminism, which is really toxic and destructive. But the mindset between a lot of these movements has never been to help or empower women. It has not. And over time, it has actually become it went from a movement where women could, express and live in their grievances toward men. So it needed to create separation between the sexes and make us enemies with one another. So that then the nuclear household would start to break apart at its fundamental core. So now we're not just working and then coming home together to be a family. Now we live in separate homes because now everybody's divorcing, right?
Yeah.
So, and then now we need more homes, right? So now we need to buy more houses because now our kids live in multiple different houses and in different places, right? And so you see how this entity, this government, started to put in structures to actually support the disintegration of these families, and especially in families and communities of color, right, where they introduced things like, no child gets left behind, the war on drugs, and other types of programs that actually incarcerated, Black and brown men and took them out of their homes completely. So if you didn't end up getting divorced, then you ended up going to jail or prison, right? And the government actually incentivized mothers to stay single and to not marry their child's father, where a mother would actually be compensated through government programs for it at a higher level to not marry him than if she did marry him, right?
Yeah.
So look at that. Like, you would get WIC, you would get Medicaid, you would get all kinds of access to government programs if you didn't marry your child's father and instead you married daddy government.
Yeah.
That really promoted women to continue to create a divide between not only the existing divide where previously, like, oh, we have all these grievances against men because you withheld our rights and you wouldn't let us vote and you're all of this. Then it was like, oh no, wait a minute, I actually can benefit more if I push you away. I can benefit financially, and you still have to pay me child support, which is a system. Child support in and of itself is a system that benefits the government because the government makes money off of putting men on child support. And so as our family systems continue to destruct, guess what? The system continues to benefit from that destruction.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Financially. Yeah, it's amazing how the child support in some states there, if you've been together long enough, you actually have to pay alimony too, which really is a contradiction between the strong independent woman and then, okay, if she's, I think a man should support his kids, of course, but a lot of times the child support has very little to do with raising. I guarantee you, raising these 6 kids by myself was financially more economic than if I would have had to pay child support on them. And the problem with that is, as you may well know, if your income raises, the child support, she can go back every year and keep raising that child support, no matter.
Looks like their signal dropped.
You lose it? You still there?
There we are. Yeah, there you go.
We had a little blink out there. But so, yeah, it's almost like, especially, and I've dealt with the court system because I've been married and divorced through some custody battles. And really, I cannot advise my sons to marry. I believe in marriage. And I believe it's the optimal situation to raise kids, a functional marriage. But I can't advise my kids in good conscience to marry here in the States because the court is so leaned in favor of the woman. If they split up, he's financially ruined until, for 21 years until the kid grows up, and it could just be a disaster for him. And whether he even gets to see his kid, he has rights, but at least in our state, if she doesn't want you to see the kid, you're not going to see the kid. So it's really, really tough. Like you said, it's an incentive there for people not to get married. And you talked about the tax deal. I remember reading that they discovered how much more they could make when the women got into the workforce during World War II, because the women were working there. And I believe in equal rights, of course, but they did a study about that back then when they increased the daily work hours from 8 to 12 hours a day. The women's accident rate went up like 150%, but the men's didn't go up. See, we're not equal in physical strength. I mean, there's exceptions and outliers, but I mean, I believe we're all equal in the eyes of God, but we're different. I'm never going to have a baby. I understand that. I can't nurture these kids the way a woman could. When they get hurt or something, come to me, I'm like, hey, what were you doing? You start, no, I didn't do that.
Suck it up, Yeah,
But a mother would pick him up and, oh, it's okay. What happened? I nearly missed that. So I'm not going to say, but a lot of, I hear some women say that I can raise them just as well by myself. I don't need a man. That's bullshit. It'd be like me saying I can raise them well by myself without a woman. I can't. I can do a good job, but I cannot, like you said, you're not a man. I'm not a woman. I'll never know what it's like to be a woman. So I can't relate to them like a woman. And I can see the need there. So really, I'm not one of these guys, and I see some creators that, oh, the women are this, they're bad, they're this. We need to find some way to get together because we're better together than we are divided. But as you said, I think we're divided because it's good for the government, the shadow government, or whoever's pushed this agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people are, there's a group of people which I believe personally, I believe are the majority who understand that, right? Who understand that kids should be raised in nuclear families, that people should, choose partners and that they align with fully based on their value system, so that they could keep their family or increase the odds of keeping their family together as their children grow up. I do believe there's people who are really seeing right through this feminist agenda, more than not, and also the agenda to emasculate men, right? It's called anti-masculine, right? This idea now that a masculine man is a threat, right?
Yeah.
And like if you look at the men that show up in marketing and TV and commercials, and most of those men all look and are effeminate or gay.
They are.
Um, yeah, and the masculine men, the only time masculine men show up in media is if they're being violent towards women or children, or just violent in general if they're destroying things. So we really need to be able to kind of be conscious about these things and understand how we are being programmed subconsciously to believe that certain things are right and other things are wrong. The feminine woman is also being, we're being programmed to see the feminine woman as really nothing more than either a prude, right? A prude who, is really only good for being barefoot and pregnant, or if she's not a prude, then she's the complete opposite. She's a slut. That's the feminine woman. Now the normal woman is the woman in a pantsuit, right? The Hillary Clinton looking woman with the short hair, with the masculine, expression and tone, and career driven over anything and everything else, right? She doesn't give a crap about relationships. She's all money and career. Now that's the woman type that's being exalted. So, that woman, she needs a soft male, right? She can't be with a masculine male because a masculine male won't choose her. A masculine male would reject her, right? Because there's only room for one masculine entity in a relationship, you know?
How do you think that works though, when the woman is more masculine and the man is more feminine? Does she have the desire for him as a man at the same if she were in her feminine role? Because a woman being, I mean, I know there's, like I said, there's always exceptions, but in general, a woman is naturally and biologically feminine. That's her natural role. But as you said, they've been programmed to, I see it in school now and it has for years, they're programmed to have a career. Nobody's ever taught to be a wife and a mother, and it's almost like that, a wife and a mother. No, they're growing up to have the career. When you see on many dating sites or talk to young women, the first thing, oh, I got a degree in this, or I'm going to college for this. Or none of them ever say, I'm going to meet this man, I'm going to settle down and have a family. They'd probably get ridiculed if they said that, like they're weak or something. But there's so much strength in femininity. If you look throughout history, Cleopatra was a woman that brought Napoleon down too. But a woman can either make or break a man. She can use the power of her femininity to, and then if the man, to empower that man to where he can be great. And then when he is, and she's with him, then she benefits. So a true leader doesn't dominate so much as like a boss and a dictator, like a lot of people want to say. A leader is the one that puts himself on the line. I mean, if someone breaks in the house, he's the one who goes down and protects the family. I think so many people are living in such a bubble that they think that, well, they just call the police. Well, the police can't always get there. I've traveled around the world a
I'm
lot.
gonna get there in time.
Yeah, I lived in a third world country. And I'll guarantee you the women are much more feminine acting there or are feminine because it's dangerous. You need a man to protect you. You live in a house with bars on the windows, razor wire on top. Now, see, we're so far removed from that here, and men have made a country that is so safe. I mean, we have crime, of course, but in general, compared to the biggest part of the world, it's so safe that women have this illusion of not needing men. But the structures and the systems are set up by men and maintained by men so that they can have this safety. And we did because always men have given their lives for women and children throughout history. So to me, it's really just it's an illusion or a deception or the delusional to think. It'd be like me saying we don't need women. Well, guess what's going to happen? We're going to be extinct pretty soon, right? Okay.
Hmm.
No more kids. So I don't even understand how a person can rationally think that they don't need men any more than I could say we don't need women. We need each other. Since the beginning
Yeah.
of time, we need each other. And that's more my message when it comes to relationships as far as men and women is we don't need to be bashing each other. It's okay to make a joke about how women and how men are, I think, but because we're different. It's like men are from what is it? Women are from Venus, men are from Mars, something like that. It's kind of funny, but it's true. We think differently, women and men, because we are different. I don't believe there's this push for the sameness. I guess you're aware of that, and we're not the same. We're different. But almost sometimes people will even a bad mouth or hate on you if you say that we're not different. So what do you think about the push for sameness and not only equal opportunity, believe in that, but equal outcome? Like
Yeah.
if a woman wants, I don't see any women beating down their door to do my construction work or lay bricks. We don't want to do that. But I tell you what, if they come here and did the same job or a better job than the man, I would pay them more than the man. It doesn't matter, but they're not. So, but we're just not. They're just not made for that. What's your feeling about that and how it affects, actually, how it affects relationships on a wide spectrum between men and women?
Yeah, I mean, as a traditional woman and a woman who was raised as a Christian, I believe in the biblical idea behind marriage and family and being a husband or a wife, um, and the differences between women and men, they are inherent and the way that God created. And so I think that we need to be very conscious that anything that is going against the nature of humanity, any message that goes against the nature of how men and women are, right? The fact that our nature is what dictates that we are meant to live together, right? That we're meant to be together, that we're meant to not only procreate together, that a wife is a helper to a husband. The fact that we're different and yet complementary to one another, right? Anything that is against that, you have to see that as part of the larger agenda to continue to create separation, not only in society, but between the sexes. And therefore, it's not of God and it's not of us, right? There is an agenda behind the message of sameness and equality, right? And it is to continue under the guise and the feeling and the look of love and unity when it could not be further from the truth. There is nothing loving or uniting about the idea that we're all the same and that there are no differences and therefore we don't need one another. You see how that's like inherently creates separation. It's like that's the part of the message that they leave out is the separation part, and this is why we're going to become so the same that then we don't even need to have genders anymore, right? What's biblical about that? We have genders because men and women are different and yet complementary, and we know what we need one another to survive. Like survival of the species is critical to our differences, and so remaining aligned with that is part of what will actually get us out of the belief.
We lost you there for a minute. We got you back now.
Yes, I saw you guys drop for a moment. I was saying that remaining aligned with what's true, with the truth, right? Because nowadays people think whatever you feel is true, you know. Staying aligned with the truth will help you see what's not true. You're still there?
Yeah,
Yeah. I think that's here, Frank. Is that on our end?
I think it's us. Yeah, definitely.
Or we got, the there on the, is he on, shut him off or something?
I think probably someone's on the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, have him get off there. We get all the kids on the Wi-Fi here sometimes. It might be on our end here. Now I once heard that 75% of your success or failure in life will be directly correlated with your ability to form healthy relationships with other people. And I believe that because life is all about relationships. And we've been speaking about more about romantic or intimate relationships. So one thing I like about my business is I get to meet people all the time, clients in their homes, and I form relationships with them. Um, and I can see how important that is. I don't believe it doesn't make any difference how educated you are if you cannot get along with people. And to be able to get along with difficult people is even more of a skill. That's where your true success comes from is your ability to be able to negotiate through people, to get along with people, to
Yeah.
understand people. So, in business, I know you, now I shipped your podcast, The Edgy Entrepreneur. Is that you or are you?
Yes, that is me and my business partner. Yes.
I enjoyed, I watched a few of your videos.
Thank
But
you.
that's so important, because I've been an entrepreneur. I've been since '85. I've worked for myself and done, now I have this YouTube channel plus my other business. I had English school in Guatemala for 6 years and the
Excellent.
different cultures. And so, just learning to get along with the different people of different cultures, different races. And that goes back to what we talk about this division here. We have so much diversity here in the US. And what is it? United we stand, divided we fall. We need to stick together somehow. We need to be working together. And then the same with like with clients, such as clients, I work together with them to serve their needs. And that's something too that I grew up here in the US and the message I got, or what I believe I got when I was allowing myself to be programmed. I don't watch the news, I don't listen to anything except what I want to listen to now because I want to program myself. Been doing that for years. Where was I going with that? But you have to program yourself and be careful what you put in, what you allow into yourself. I lost my point there where I was going with it. But
Yeah, you were talking about how 75% of our relationships,
so yeah,
um,
so that is a skill that needs to be taught. I don't know whether they teach that in colleges or whether they're. It sounds like from what you've told me, what I've heard that the colleges are almost part of the agenda. Like maybe they're pushing the agenda instead of us this include. It's almost like they say they want everybody to be included and we all want to get along, but yet it seems like the undercurrent is they're pushing people apart. Yeah.
well,
So
I mean, it's most college campuses are teaching gender ideology. So especially in that sense, then yeah, you could be consider them to be part of the agenda. But I think we have to be cognizant that any large scale entity that looks to not only teach people how to think but what to think is passing on an indoctrination message, and so that could be the military, right? I mean, the military indoctrinates people.
yeah,
um, Schools indoctrinate people K through 12, not just college campuses. Sometimes it's an employment setting that can indoctrinate people. And that's why, when we talk about these settings, we have to understand like it's the people within the setting that are doing the actual indoctrinating of newcomers into the setting.
right.
And so that's why relationships are so important because the 5 people that you spend the most time around are indoctrinating you with the way that they think and the way that they perceive the world. And if those people that are around you, the 5 people that are closest to you, are not people who have a high level of consciousness, who see the world from a higher order perspective, who understand the power of creation, who can see God consciousness in our environment, right? Those people are going to have the power to be able to impact the way that you think, the way you feel, the way that what you value, right? And quite frankly, like once a person can impact what you value and what you believe, they can get you to do just about anything. You know, if you think about the gang setting, this is why gangs are actually so popular in certain cities and cultures, because a gang will bring in a person and indoctrinate them with their values, their beliefs, and their way of thinking, and lead them to believe that all of that is better than where they are or where they came from. And in that person's perspective, that may very well be true. One of the top values of a gang is family and unity and protecting one another at all costs. Doesn't that sound nice?
Yeah.
Especially if you've never had that,
Yeah.
right? Most families have those values too, right? But the difference is that one of them is, you know, in that gang environment, they can actually lead one another to commit violent crimes to prove their loyalty,
Right.
you know, which is another value that they carry. So how can you uphold these values, right, in a healthy and loving way? That's going to be determined quite a bit by the environment that you're in and the people that you're around. You know,
You
you have
truly,
this nature versus nurture. You know, your parents can only pass on so much
right.
of their indoctrination, and quite frankly, a lot of times our parents are passing on generational trauma. And so it's part of our responsibility, and I really believe it's a duty in terms of our life purpose to clear ourselves of generational trauma and to break those patterns so that we don't pass it on to the next generation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. What we're talking about, well, I said, but I agree 100%. And what we're talking about, most people don't want to look within. I mean,
Correct.
I've done a lot for the last 30 years. I've done a lot of that. And I'll admit, sometimes you really don't want to go back and look. It's rather frightening, I would say. So you have to have the desire for something different to be stronger than what you're living, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. So, and most people aren't even aware that what they're doing today or how they're acting today is very possibly from something that happened when they were 5 years old or 10 years old, whatever it happens to be. And even if they become aware of it, most people don't want to do the work. They want to just join the masses, do what everybody else is doing. They say the average American watches 4 to 6 hours of TV a night. We don't have a TV here. If I want to watch a movie, I'll get one up on Amazon or something like that. But I read, but before I was 30, I didn't do that. I was just a normal party kind of guy, and I watched TV and worked and whatever. But something happened in my life that was a traumatic experience, I suppose you want to call it that changed my whole perspective. The old me died, and then this other part of me started coming out that was searching for something more than what the world had to offer. And I've been doing that ever since. How do we, you said this earlier too, about how, where's the men at? I agree. That's one reason I started doing this, because through my sons, so many kids come over here. Their parents are either dead from overdoses, or they're in jail, or they're living with the ground. It's just incredible. They don't know anything. Half of them don't know how to shake hands because no one's ever taught them. They have no idea what to do on a date, or how to treat a girl, or how to ask a girl out, how to work. There's so much because they have no mentors. So that's one reason I started doing this, because fortunately for me, when I grew up, I had mentors. I had people to show me the there's good and bad, and it just depends how you use it. Um, and just taking more or less how to get a woman into bed and get what you want, and pump and dump is a phrase they use, and I don't agree with that. So I think we need to find a way, as I said before, to somehow, like what you're doing and what I'm doing, get people to realize we need each other. We have to work together, and I think, but how to get these people that are, I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So I guess all we can do is lay it out there for their inspection.
Yeah.
They want to pick it up. They want to pick the tools up, because it's frustrating trying to. I've learned not to help someone who doesn't. They just call or they talk to you and they want to spill their problems, but they just won't do the work. People like that will burn your energy. So those
Yeah.
you can help, some you can't.
Yeah. I'll tell you something that I've learned over, probably at least 10 years as an educator. Um, and in the last 4 years as a coach, but this really, really like was a rude awakening for me. Like it just slapped me in the face in 2020. Um, and that was that it's not my responsibility to wake people up
Right.
who are sleeping. And when I saw everything that was happening with the pandemic, you know, initially I actually like fell for it and was like, oh wow, this is a real thing. But probably at least a month and a half in, I really started asking some really hard questions and looking at the situation through a critical eye until it finally occurred to me that this is a bunch of bullshit. And when I started trying to talk to other people about that and wake them up to what I had discovered, and show them information, I lost relationships because people did not want to hear it. People, and I wasn't even saying take my word for it. I wanted them to do the research. And like you said, you could lead a horse to water.
Right.
You could dump a pile of books and research papers and all kinds of things in front of a person, but you can't make them read them, even after they asked you to show them proof.
Right.
They still won't read it. And so, it's like, well, how many hours of research have you done on this topic? Well, none. Okay, I've done at least 100 hours worth of research on this topic. Would you like to hear what I have to say about it? No, right? Because it sounds crazy. And they've already been indoctrinated to believe what the TV's telling them, right? If it's not in the mainstream, then it can't be true. So, after losing several relationships and having several confrontational conversations with people who I thought were like intelligent, reasonable people, that was the awakening that I had. And I really believe that that was spirit led because I was feeling low energy. I was feeling sadness, guilt. I was really hurting, Mark. I don't know how else to describe it. I was legitimately hurting over the fact that I couldn't wake these people up, and I was making it my responsibility to wake them up. And that was what needed to change, right? What was divinely inspired was the realization that it's not my responsibility to wake people up. I am only a guide and a facilitator. People need to be awakened, and only the Holy Spirit can do that. And once they're awake, I am happy to support their continued awakening and guiding their path, just like I've had many guides and facilitators. I will help guide somebody else. But waking them up from their slumber, it's just not possible. It's not my role anymore. It never was my role, right? I thought it was, but it's not.
It reminds me of a saying that says, "A man convinced against his will is a man of the same opinion still."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of. I was in the same thought as you. After at first, I was cautious and wondered, but then, yeah, I was thinking you were talking about you had the information, but those people would say, "But I watched the news." See, I didn't watch the news.
Me
We
neither.
I didn't participate in any of it. Only if I had to wear a mask to get a haircut or something. That was just. I didn't travel for 2 years because I didn't want to go through all the bull. And now I started traveling again because you can go places now. And but of course, I believe everyone has a right to make their own choice of what they want to do. And I'm glad I wasn't forced to do something so I could, that I didn't want to do just so I could buy food. I was already thinking, well, if they do that, maybe I'll have the kids buy the food. I'll have them go. I was already planning ways I could get around certain things if I were going to be forced to do something I didn't want to do. So yeah, it's like a mass hypnosis type deal. Everywhere I went, it was back in the background. The message. I won't say it. I'm not sure. I'm still cautious about what I say. The messages that you would hear in the background to go along with what the agenda. And people don't realize that. And I tell people all the time, if you're not programming yourself with books, audio, like audible books, audio and reading books, and YouTube creators who speak about and teach you about things that you want, you're being programmed by someone else. Because I don't know what, somewhere, I don't know how many advertisements we are subjected to every day. And you may not consciously know it, but this billboard out here, your subconscious picks that up. And that you're talking to Joe over here, and that low voice message that's playing in the background at Deerberg's or Walmart or wherever, that's getting in there. That all gets in there. And if you're not actively trying to program yourself, then you're getting all of that stuff in there. But most people don't realize that. They think that they run their life by their conscious mind, and studies indicate that 95% of everything you do during the day is done subconsciously. You just think
Right.
you just think you do it. You make the decision. So, but when you talk about things like that to some people, they just they don't get it because they've been programmed since they were kids to actually think. Even school teaches us to think with a conscious mind. And I'll tell you a message
Yeah.
they told me when I was growing up, which I didn't buy. I was not a conformist. I was a rebel. If you don't get a high school education, you won't get a good job. And they told that to my father, who quit, and I quit. And they told that to my sons. Now, if you grow up believing that, guess what? You quit and you tell yourself, I can't try for that because I didn't get a high school education. I'm dumb. I'm this and that. And I believe in education. I constantly educate myself on things that I want to expand and grow in. Daily, I do that. But that's not true. That's a lie that they've been telling them for years. And I'm not bashing education, but the formal education is great for some people, but a lot of people are just, I'm a guy that uses my hands, construction, I like that. But that's not for everybody. But they still group everybody together. And you might know this, but I actually heard that the school system was created or initiated by Rockefeller because he wanted workers. He didn't want
Right.
free thinkers. So they're just teaching us to memorize, basically, is what they're teaching us. What are
Yeah,
your thoughts?
I mean, think about the irony in that. Like, school indoctrinates you on what to believe and to be a follower, and then the feminist movement. How ironic that the feminist movement will teach women not to follow, right? That they don't have to follow, their man, that is, but they can go into the workplace and follow, right? Because they think that the recompense of a paycheck that's heavily taxed is somehow more valuable than a family unit or a secure family unit. This is why, one of the things you mentioned earlier I wanted to circle back to was about your sons, and like not necessarily being very enthusiastic about the idea that they would marry, and just how careful they need to be. And I absolutely agree that they need to be careful about who they marry. But even before that, us all, like, we just have to be careful about who we create relationships with at
Right.
all times. It's not just marriage in that context. Really young men need to be taught to protect their seed first off, so that they don't end up getting somebody pregnant on accident and creating
Yeah.
an unwanted pregnancy that potentially could then result in an unwanted um, co-parenting situation, or even unwanted or reluctant marriage.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, and that often ends up in divorce at some point in time, right? So just really teaching men, do take full ownership and responsibility over your ability to procreate, right? Don't trust that a woman says, yes, I'm on the pill or whatever. Just do what you have to do to avoid the possibility that anything could happen, right? And that includes not having drunk sex, to be totally honest with you, because it's just too easy these days to get caught up in a situation like that. And you thought it would be one night, and then all of a sudden it's 20 plus years, with this person. Um, it's always it's harmful for the children as well. It's one thing for your parents to get divorced, but to know that your parents never loved each other, never really had affection or care from one another, and that eventually your child finds out that their pregnancy and resulting birth was from something that was supposed to be one night. That's very hard on a child, you know. So just protect your seed, for men, be very, very careful, do not have a child with a crazy person. It's like my mom used to tell that, my sister and I were just two daughters, but my mom used to tell us all the time, like, do not get in a relationship with a crazy person and have a kid with that person because you're stuck with them for life.
Yeah.
And so building relationships that are based on a solid foundation of a value system. Doesn't matter if it's romantic, if it's a friendship, even more so, because your friends will get you into some hell potentially if you're not careful, and if they're not people that share your values. Business is the same, right? Do business with people who have a solid value system that matches yours. When it comes to hiring people, right? You want to hire the values that your business wants to espouse in servicing its clients, right? And if you bring on people who don't, they won't care about your business or your clients. Um, it always comes back down to values. That's the first thing that I teach in my coaching program, or what are your values? And I will tell you 9 times out of 10, when people say what their values are, they're just saying things that sound pretty. They just say like, oh, I value, family and this and, loyalty, whatever. They're just talking. And you actually see the way that they live and they don't value those things.
Right.
I tell people right away, like, show me how you spend your top resources, your time, money, and attention. And I will tell you what you value based on how you spend your resources.
Yeah. Show me your checkbook and I'll see what you value. Yeah.
Yeah. How you spend your time, money, and attention is what you value. And if you don't value, like you could tell me you value family all day. If you don't spend any time, money, or attention on your family, you don't value them.
Right. Yeah, I'm very fortunate because my boys work for my company. I get to spend a lot of time with them because of my schedule. I've told them sometimes that if I worked for someone else, I wouldn't get to spend near the time that we get to spend. I take them a lot of play. Well, out of necessity, when they were younger, I had to take them with me a lot of times. So, but now I can't. Actually, I've got to live. I've had the privilege of living with them in a way that maybe people did 50 or maybe 50 or 100 years ago with a family. Maybe they grew up on a farm with a business, and the boys or the kids grew up helping out in the business. So that's something
Wonderful.
you really can't. Really, I consider myself a rich man just for that in that aspects of life. So that's something that most people don't get nowadays because they're working. They take their kid to daycare, then they go to school, and then the kids in daycare afterwards. They pick them up, and the kid comes home, goes to his room with his iPad, and they don't even know their kids. They don't even know what's going
Yeah.
on in his life. And even though I spend time with them, sometimes I don't quite know what's going on, but I usually have a better handle on it. And we can talk like men. I talk to my daughter and I teach her the values that I have. And not only do I teach her, she is, because more truth is caught than taught. They learn by my example much more than
Mhm.
what I say. So if my words don't line up with what I'm doing, then there's going to be a discrepancy there, and they're not going to do they're going to do what I do, not what I say. So that's just important for parents to develop the best possible relationship they can have with their kids because kids need that. When they're young, kids look at their parents as gods because in their eyes they are, because without their parents, that's where they get their food, their shelter, everything from.
Right.
So it's so important what we say to our kids because I grew up in a situation, my dad was a rough World War II veteran. He grew up in the Depression, and I heard things like, you're never going to amount to anything. You know, you can't pound sand in a rat hole. Now, and I love my dad, but that's the best. That's what he gave me better than what he had. So, and I learned to accept that and deal with that later on. But those things make impressions on you. And I had found myself earlier in life self-sabotaging because deep down in, subconsciously, I felt like I didn't deserve anything. So these are things that parents, like you said, parents pass that on. My kids have never heard me say anything like that to them. They've never seen me drink. My father was a heavy drinker, maybe an alcoholic. So, but now that I've caught myself saying some of the same things that my mother said to me that made me feel less than. But I could come back to them and tell them that, hey, my mom used to say it to me. It's something that just comes out and make amends for it. So a person needs to be self-aware, especially to have healthy relationships. Because if you're,
Absolutely.
and I always say, take the word blame out of your vocabulary. I believe we create a reality with what's going. If you're a mess in here, guess what? And you talked about crazy. I've been with a few crazy women, but hey, what's going on in me? I got to look at myself because apparently they're attracted to me because I got some of that inside of me. That's a tough pill to swallow, but until you do that, you're going to end up doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. You know, a lot of the men that I talk to have experienced these relationship patterns where it's like the same relationship but with a different person,
Yeah, different.
over and over again, right? Or like they are with somebody who's just like their mom or just like their dad, you know, unbeknownst to them until some point in time where they're like, oh my gosh, I married my mom, you know, or my dad, or like I've become like my mom or like my dad, right? And so I think it's one thing to have the awareness, but it's another thing to take action. You know, awareness is only maybe, let's just say you're 40% of the way there, right? Which is not nothing. It's not nothing because there's most people are operating completely lacking all self-awareness in all aspects. Everything is external, right? And all of their circumstances and external factors are to blame for everything they are and everything they do and everything they experience, you know? But when we start to really gain self-awareness, we start to realize like, oh, wait, that's in me. I'm the one doing this thing. It's
Yeah.
something else to go, okay, wait a minute. If I want a different outcome, I have to do something different. I have to change, or I have to heal this wound or address this thing inside of me, you know? And I think that's where the beauty of either, you know, working with a therapist or a coach really comes in, is that it supports you to be able to get into meaningful, consistent action as it relates to changing yourself, right? Which is really, I think, the evolution of the next, you know, the evolution of humanity, right? Is that's where it's at. It's at the cusp of realizing where what we're doing is hurting ourselves and therefore hurting others and hurting the next generation. So we can stop doing it and start doing something else, you
Yeah,
know.
I agree. Whatever you put
Easier
out,
said than done, you know, but possible, still possible.
whatever you put out there comes back. I tell people that all the time because I experienced it on the negative side. So I was about 30, ended up by myself, and I knew why I was by myself because that empty feeling that you don't have anybody, even if you're around people, you're alone. And I realized I'm here by myself because this is all I thought about until now, me. So I ended up reaping a lot, as I say, reaping what I sowed, yeah, okay, or karma, whatever you want to call it. But what I learned from that, if it does work that way on the negative side, guess what? It works just as well on the positive side. Whatever I do for someone else will come back to be multiplied. Now, the mistake people make is they do it for that person and expect it to come back from that person. You never do that. If it does, that's great. Most of the time it doesn't, but it will come back to you. To me, it's a law. You call it the law of God, law of the universe, law of nature. Whatever you put out there is going to come back, and it comes back multiplied. So you can use that to your advantage, and I have used it to my advantage in life. And that's one of the reasons why my life is good today, because I've constantly, for lack of a better way, I've sowed good seed. Of course, I made mistakes along the way, but in general and overall, I sow good seed as I go. With my clients, I always do something extra. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. That's something I learned from, I think, Jim Rohn. You'll never get paid more than you're getting paid now until you do more than you're getting paid for now. It's kind of confusing, but I understood that and I started practicing that quite a few years back. And it's like magic. Now, I never expected back from that client, but somehow it built up an accumulative effect of goodwill or something. Yeah, it works. It really does. You get paid, you end up getting paid more than for what you do. So, but to tell someone that works in a place like McDonald's, and oh, they'll never pay any attention to me, they won't notice me. And I say, it doesn't matter. They don't have to notice. The universe or God, whatever you believe in, that notices. You can't get away from the laws of life. It just, they work. And they don't favor anyone. It's like gravity. If I climb up on the roof and jump off, if I don't believe in gravity, it doesn't matter. I'm going to hit the ground. Same way as these
Right.
laws. They
Yeah.
work and they've been taught for thousands of years. They're in the Bible, they're in other texts. And it's almost like you probably saw the movie The Secret. It's almost like some secret, but it's not a secret. But yet people still operate on the old physical, I'm not sure what you would call it, but they just seem like, well, that's all subjective. But when you look around you, everything that you see was first within someone before it became a reality out here. So everything is subjective to a certain degree before it manifests itself out here in the real world. So, and whatever you're manifesting in your life is coming from in here, as we spoke about before. So, if you have shitty relationships, there's some shitty stuff inside there you need to clean up because you draw to you what you are,
Yeah.
not so much
Yeah.
what you want. Ask somebody what kind of a woman they want, they'll say, oh, well, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't. Well, that's what you're going to get because you're thinking about what you don't want. Most people don't know what they want. That's why they never get it. Less than 1% of the population does not have written goals. They don't know what they want. They keep getting the same thing over and over every day, and they wonder why. Because they're thinking the same. They're not putting anything new in here. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. It's like insanity, doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. But as you said, you can only lay it out there for them, and if they accept it, they do, and they don't, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. One of the primary things that I lead my clients to is to the realization that their freedom lies in their ability to take personal responsibility and total ownership in their lives and over everything that they create. And that includes everything that they've created in the past.
Right.
With me, they've created things that they don't like very much, or they've not been able to create things that they desire, right? And so, a lot of people will say, well, you're not, you're blaming, right? Like I'm blaming the person if they through the concept of personal responsibility in and of itself, it's like blaming the victim, so to speak, right? Um, and of course, I mean, it takes a self-victimized mentality to believe that in the first place. The truth is that personal responsibility and total ownership is the only path to freedom. It
Yeah.
is the only path to personal freedom. When you understand that everything that you have or don't have or lack in your life is your responsibility, that you're the created it, good, bad, ugly, I don't care how you judge it, you created it, you actually become more empowered and more emboldened, not less. Because if I can take personal responsibility over the shitty situation I'm in and see that it's a reflection of me and what I have inside of me, what I accepted, maybe my lack of boundaries, maybe my inability to communicate well, maybe it's a reflection of my poor performance or my laziness or my lack of self-discipline, whatever the hell it is, right? If I can take personal responsibility and ownership over this thing I don't like, then that means that I can actually change that thing if
Yeah.
I own it. But if
Yeah.
I don't own it, I'm going to say, man, I'm in this crappy situation. And it's the economy, the government's fault, my parents' fault, my spouse's fault, the banking system, right? I'm going to have infinite number of reasons outside of myself that this situation that I'm in is bad. And so what does that do? Does that give me more power or less power when the only way to fix it is for something out there to change?
Right.
Less
Yeah.
power, right? There's no empowerment there. There's no personal power. There's no masculine or feminine power in saying it's their fault, right? The only time there's power is when I say, you know what, I created it, it sucks, and I'm going to change it. How am I going to change it? I'm going to change myself, right? And so now you're actually talking. And so when I see a person shift from, the reason it's this way is because of my job, my boss, my this, my that, to like the reason it's this way is because I haven't looked at this part of myself. I didn't exert my boundaries. I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't speak up when I should have. I said yes when I really meant no, which is self-abandonment. Like when I hear that, I'm like, hell yeah, you're ready. You are ready to make change in your life at that point.
The alternative is you're a victim. And you're talking about not being a victim.
Right.
We're gonna wrap it up here. I was supposed to be in a meeting, but I guess I'm gonna miss it. I'll wait a little time. All right, well, it's been great. Actually, I had a whole lot of questions here. Didn't get to any of them, but that's the way I like to do it.
Ah,
I like to
it's
just
okay.
I like to just go with the flow, but I had the question just as a backup. Well, I appreciate you doing this tonight. I've learned a lot that I didn't know myself. Now, where can some of my viewers get a hold of you if they want your service?
Yeah,
Like to
absolutely.
know?
My website is coachoriana.com, and my handle on just about every social media platform is Coach Oriana as well. So if you just Google Coach Oriana, I promise you'll find me. Stuff will pop up. But you're feel free to send me a message on Instagram or visit my website, and you can send me a message there too, or you could even get on my calendar on my website as well and schedule a complimentary consultation.
Okay, well, it's great having you. Thanks again. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
good for me. I appreciate you coming, and maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you as well. Thanks for hosting these conversations. And it was very nice to meet both you and your son.
Likewise, my pleasure. Take care.
Yeah. Have a good
Well, that was great. Quite a show. I learned a lot there. And we're going to wrap it up. Or have we wrapped it up yet? Tech man. Are we still
You're
on?
still on, yeah.
We're still live? All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next weekend. I don't have a guest yet. Not sure if I'm going to have a guest. Might bring Alfie Kingdom on if he's available. We were talking today. And if you'd like to get my help personally, marksinspiration.com. Check out my books on Amazon. Coming Back Home, The True Adventure of Mark Daniels, and The Power Is Within. And we got merch coming. We're still working on it, but it should be available in a week or two. Until next time.